All right, everybody, I want to do a quick rundown of part D from our lab. And in this part, we're trying to figure out salinity and how it affects the density of water as well as temperature. Salinity is just a fancy word for saltiness. And we're not really going to vary the saltiness, we're just going to really be comparing here salty water or salt water versus fresh water. And our source for fresh water is tap water. Our source for salt water is some water that we mixed up. So in the lab, we asked people to do a bunch of different experiments. Basically, we asked you to maybe take a graduated cylinder. Here's a graduated cylinder. Put a known amount of liquid in, let's say 10 milliliters. Know how much that graduated cylinder weighs. I didn't say it before, but know the mass of that empty graduated cylinder. And then once you've added your 10 milliliters of water, put that graduated cylinder with the 10 milliliters of water or whatever water you're using. Each one's different. Salt water, pure water, warm water, cold water. Put it on a balance and see what it weighs. And this is a way, again, of looking at density. Remember, density is defined as mass, so how much stuff per volume. So how tightly packed things are together. So 10 milliliters of pure water, and down here I've created just an example data table. You see down here, right? So if I took cool water, cold water, 4 degrees Celsius water, and I put 10 milliliters of that water in a graduated cylinder, I would expect it to have a mass of exactly 10 grams. I'll write this in a different color here, so bear with me. So 10 grams for 10 mils. If I take that same water, well, not the same water, if I warm this room temperature pure water up to 50 degrees Celsius, which is pretty warm, halfway to boiling, and I put 10 milliliters of 50 degree water in my graduated cylinder, I actually would expect it to weigh about 9.8 grams. And if I put room temperature, so this was cold water, remember, in the middle, room temperature water, 20 degrees, so I really don't have these in order. Here's the coldest, here's the warmest, there's the middle one. Sorry about that. So the middle one would be what you might expect, 9.9 grams. So there's an interesting trend there. As we get warmer, we go from cold to a little bit warmer to a little bit warmer. You see what happens with the density of that water. Now, similarly, if I take salt water, and ocean water in particular, we put that salt water, and I take 10 milliliters of salt water and I mass it out at 4 degrees Celsius. Let's say I get something like 10.3 grams. And then you're going to see a similar pattern. This would be about 10.2, and this is about 10.1 grams. So there's an example of how that data shifts. Now the last thing we did, so some of our lab groups did some variations of these. I'm not sure, I don't think we recorded temperatures, but we had warm, we had cold, we had room temperature. People had the different masses, and hopefully they will talk about, again, as it says, use the space below for photographs and words, talking about what conclusions you can draw. So I'm not going to draw any conclusions down here other than to say, here are some data that you can use. The last thing we ask the class to do is to take these different variations. So let's imagine I decide to choose warm pure water and cold salt water. And I'm going to mix them carefully in one container, and I want to see what happens when I mix those two liquids. And the way to see what happens is I'm going to actually put food coloring in the warm water. I'm going to color this something. Well, if I do that, I might get something that looks like this. So this is some more evidence. Notice we have, it's not like a perfect layer, but there's a pretty solid layer here where we have green stuff on top, clear stuff down below. This was the warm, pure water. This was cold, salt water. Again, I'm going to leave it at that and let you sort of draw some conclusions about what that means.